Welcome to We Are Montgomery Township, the podcast where we keep you informed and engaged about what's happening in Montgomery Township in Montgomery County.
Welcome to We Are Montgomery Township, the podcast that brings you inside the decisions shaping our community. Today we're talking about something that affects us all, fire safety. With response times increasing and volunteer numbers declining, Montgomery Township is considering a major change, transitioning to a fully staffed 24/7 career fire department. With me today is Chief Bill Wiegman, and I am your host and Township Manager Carolyn McCreary. Bill, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So first, can you tell our audience what types of calls the fire department responds to?
Yes, we're a all hazards agency. We are the agency that people call when they don't know who else to call, or they have a funny smell, or there was water leaking, or their electric's buzzing. They call the fire department. And of course, we're happy to respond to those calls, but firefighters need to know a lot more than just how to put the wet stuff on the red stuff, right? We have to be able to appropriately respond, be competent, and solve people's problems. That's what we are. We're problem solvers. Montgomery Township, we of course respond to structure fires. We respond to a lot of alarms. We provide EMS, so any priority 1 calls or any calls where we think we should respond, shooting, stabbings, chokings. We respond to cardiac arrest, bleeding calls. Anytime we think that we can help with a positive outcome, we're on the road responding. We respond to rescue incidents, including technical rescues. We do have several trained people in rope rescue and trench rescue and structural collapse, water rescue. We have a boat that we utilize, more of a rescue raft, so that when there is flooding in low-lying areas, our team can go out. They're properly equipped to rescue people from houses that are flooding or cars that have flooded. So it's really that all hazards approach that when a resident or a business owner or a visitor comes to Montgomery Township and they need help, we're out there. We respond sometimes to people who have a weird smell in their yard and it's a skunk, but they thought it was gas. We've responded to incidents where people hear a weird sound in their home and they're not sure what it is, and we come out and help them mitigate those problems. So it's being able to operate in that all hazards environment, but that dictates the need to be well-disciplined and competent in a lot of different disciplines.
So what's the current makeup of our fire department?
So we're currently a combination department. We have volunteers that respond 24/7. And then we have a career staff that works Monday through Friday from 7 in the morning till 5 at night. And that has helped with our daytime, weekday responses when our volunteers are at work or they have other things going on where they can't come out during the day to respond.
So let's dive in a little bit. Let's start with what's the problem. Can you break down the current challenges that the fire department's facing?
Yeah, our number one problem right now is to ensure that we have an appropriate response time as dictated by NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection Agency, and ensuring that we get the appropriate amount of members to your house in a reasonable amount of time. That's probably the number one response problem that we are faced with right now. And we've tried different ways to make that happen, but what we found over the years, and I've been here since 2006, so I've seen the flows of the fire department, but it's consistently been to ensure that we get out with the right amount of staffing, the qualified people, and in the right amount of time. And we're seeing as volunteerism continues to decrease, not only in our town, but all over the country, but now it's impacting our town to a point where I don't know if we're going to be able to make up the deficit, but we're seeing the inability to get a truck to your door in a reasonable amount of time across all conditions.
So what do you consider a reasonable amount of time in a community that's urbanized like Montgomery Township?
The NFPA would state that we need to have 15 qualified firefighters to a structure fire within 9 minutes. We're very fortunate that our career staff currently in 2025 is getting on scene from the time of dispatch to the time of arrival at your door in 4 minutes and 25 seconds. And that's challenging because, as you know, Montgomery Township has a lot of traffic. But I know we pride ourselves on getting out the door from the time we're dispatched to the time we're in the truck in 60 seconds, and then getting to your house right now during the day in 4 minutes and 25 seconds. What we're seeing, though, is our volunteers are struggling with getting out in that reasonable amount of time, that below the 9-minute mark. Right now in 2025, our volunteers are getting on scene in 9 minutes and 49 seconds, so almost 10 minutes. We're seeing, when we break it down by day for 2025, we're seeing that Saturdays we're getting to your house in 10 minutes and 46 seconds, Sundays 10 minutes and 5 seconds, Mondays 10 minutes and 39 seconds, Tuesdays 11 minutes and 14 seconds, and Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday are around 9 minutes, some being over or a little bit below. And the issue is that when a volunteer comes from home, they have to drop everything they're doing, drive to the station, get in the truck, and then take the truck to your house. So staff stations really matter with response times. And that ensures victim survivability and firefighter safety, because we know that fire doubles in size every 30 seconds. We know that with the building construction in our town, mostly wood frame construction, that the time for flashover, the time for building collapse is increasing based on the materials that are in your home. So we're really, the longer the response time affects the ability for the firefighters to do their job and survivability rates of people who could be trapped. Because when we look at time of flashover, we're seeing how that has continued to decrease, where we don't have as much time as we used to have in legacy construction to get to your home and compartmentalize the fire and put the fire out. Now with open floor plans and products inside your home, including your house, shingles, siding, that is all petroleum based, fires are taking off. And I keep saying time to flashover. Well, flashover means total involvement.
Understood.
So if a room comes to flashover, everything in that room is on fire. And that could impact the building collapsing. It could impact anybody who's trapped. And then it puts our people in more harm. Firefighting is a dangerous job. And we have standards in place for both career and volunteer members to try to keep them as safe as possible. But time is our biggest enemy. And now we're placing our volunteers at greater risk because it's taking them longer to get to the scene of a fire. So the best chance for survival and the best chance for our people to remain safe is to get there as quickly as possible.
So a couple of things. When you mentioned about volunteers responding, I'm still old school. I see the blue light and I pull over.
Right.
But what is the requirement? I mean, obviously we know when it's a career fire department, the red lights are going. Everybody hopefully knows pull over for emergency services. But, you made a reference about them getting from their home to the station. How's that a challenge in our township?
Traffic congestion, traffic lights. A blue light is a courtesy light. A blue light doesn't mean you can hop in your car and drive around people and go through red lights. The blue light law is a courtesy light. People, if they choose to move over for you, they can. They don't have to, and you still can't go through red lights. So for our Battalion 1 station that's at Stump Road and 309, that is challenging to get to, especially a lot of our volunteers live in the orchards across from the rec center or live across from the Chamonix Falls off of Philly Drive and back in there. And trying to get across 309 and Stump with a blue light is impossible. So even when we have lots of people responding to the firehouse, our response times are significantly increased, dramatically increased, because of the traffic in town.
Well, we're also 10 square miles.
Right.
We are not a borough that's, 3 square miles and the fire station's like centrally located.
Right.
So I can see, knowing where both of our battalions are, Battalion 2 being over near Pinecrest, I could see obviously if you live over in any of those neighborhoods adjacent to it, that's easier to get to. But
Right.
if the fire is over on the side of the township where Battalion 1 is, I would think that's a greater challenge for our volunteers.
Right. And, we have several firefighters that live in the Canterbury section where I live, and they can get to Battalion 2 quickly. But we also have some firefighters that live in Chalfont, and they have to cross Doylestown Road and County Line Road. And with a blue light, that's another intersection that's impossible to kind of get across and navigate. And, we don't want our firefighters running red lights. We would never encourage that at all, because most firefighters are killed, right? Cardiac events are number 1 and traffic incidents are number 2, and that's responding to stations. So traffic crashes occur at intersections with fire trucks and with people responding to the scene. So, and when you want to help and you're trained to help, you want to get there as quickly as possible. So when the pager goes off, or the phone goes off now, pager shows my age. When the phone goes off, people, and they read the notes and see there's a fire and potentially people trapped, they're rushing to get to the firehouse. That adrenaline is going, and they're trying to get there as fast as possible. Our stipend program, which is our night program for volunteers, and it's been a very beneficial program for us. It puts people in the firehouse. Our stipend shifts get on scene in 7 minutes. So, it does prove to us that having people in the firehouses matter. And especially in our town, where the firehouses are kind of in areas that are traffic filled and congested. So that's a big hurdle for us to get to the firehouse.
The other thing that jumped out at me when you were talking, the construction materials and how a lot of the older homes were built.
Mm-hmm.
We say they don't build them like that anymore, but in this case, that's not always a good thing.
Right.
And the other thing, I forget where I was, it was probably one of your trainings where they talked about a mattress now is the equivalent of, I forget how many gallons of fuel,
right,
because of what things are made of. So I would imagine those two things plus the increasing response time could result in definitely loss of property, tragically also possibly loss of life.
Yeah, I mean, building construction and building materials could be catastrophic loss. Your carpet is made from petroleum-based products. Your furniture, your shingles, your vinyl siding, all of those things. And when we look at fires need oxygen, right? So when we were growing up in our legacy construction houses in our older communities, everything was compartmentalized. There were rooms. Now everybody wants open concept. Well, open concept allows for ventilation-fueled fires. So fires can burn faster and quicker because they're getting that oxygen intake. The other thing that, we see firefighters, everyone says, oh, why do you cut holes in the roof? Why do you break people's property? We cut a hole in the roof so all the hot air and gases can escape, right? It's part of a coordinated fire attack. Put the water on, open the hole so that gas can get out. It makes more survivability safe for people. But also with energy efficient homes now, there's no place for the smoke to go out. And we know that smoke can be explosive, especially under pressure. So there's a big push to seal my house up so nothing escapes and my heating and air conditioning bills lower, but that's creating an atmosphere inside your house that it makes the fire and the smoke under pressure. And we see backdrafts and flashovers because of that.
So let's switch gears. I know we have staff during the week and they're a great team. Why aren't the volunteers, why isn't that enough? We have great volunteers. I know I've heard you say that. I've heard other leadership in the volunteer side talk about what great volunteer firefighters we have. What's changed?
People's connection to their community has changed. People's sense of responsibility has changed. When you live in a community that has developed like Montgomery Township, where homes are really unaffordable for new home buyers, or people are paying $700,000 for a home, it's hard to get them to be volunteers, let alone volunteer firefighters. I think people on the weekends would rather volunteer their time with their children, coaching sports teams or dance or robotics, or being with their kids and their family, that work-life balance where they're home and they want to kind of shut down. I think when our firefighters are scheduled to be at the firehouse, then they are committed and the truck gets out. But on a Saturday or Sunday or a weeknight when we don't have anybody there, people don't just drop what they're doing to come to their firehouse. Everybody's lives are so scheduled and they're always moving. And when they're not moving, they want to relax. So, when I was growing up, if the beeper went off, no matter where you were, you dropped everything and went. I can remember Liam, my son's first birthday party. We were having his first birthday party at our home in Montgomeryville, and we got dispatched for a building fire at American Signature Furniture, which is now BJ's. And the notes, as we say, the notes were good. And I ran out of the house during the first birthday party and left, right? Because we had to put the fire out. People aren't doing that in our town anymore. If they're not scheduled to come, they're not coming. We had several calls over the July 4th weekend, and staffing was very limited, very, very limited. And some of them were significant. One of them was a person who was bleeding profusely. We had a rescue where a child was being choked by the seatbelt. We had a building fire in Hatfield. We had a car fire at Target, and staffing was very limited. And that's not that's not a way to run a fire department. Is just, well, we'll take what we can get when we can get it. The expectation is when somebody dials 911, they're going to get a response, and it's going to be quick, because it's probably the worst day of their life. They don't need us being delayed or not showing up or showing up with people who don't know how to do the job. So I think, looking at it from that point of view is, yes, we have great volunteers, and our volunteers are awesome. On a drill night, we'll have 50 people at the firehouse with our fire police unit included. But I think when they're on their time and they're at home with their family, they're not as willing or able to just drop everything they're doing to run to the firehouse. And then when they do run to the firehouse, it takes a while to get there. So there's a lot of barriers to a quick response or even responding. Every time you leave your house is an hour.
Absolutely.
And that's on a small call, right? On a major call, you could be out for hours.
Sure.
But, every time you leave your house, it's an hour. So, Saturday morning, leaving your house for an hour before the family's up, that's no problem. But a Saturday afternoon when baseball or lacrosse or whatever's going on, it's harder to get away and to leave for an hour.
So a couple of things. One of the reasons I admire our volunteer firefighters so much is because for me, working, it's hard to even commit to something for an hour a week,
Right.
much less what they have to do. The other thing is we were built as a bedroom community. So there's a lot of older communities where they had, say, a central employer. And that employer knew that some of the people working for him, sometimes a lot of the people were volunteer firefighters, and they could lead. There were public works departments that were, volunteer firefighters were employed, and they were allowed to go to fires. You had some rural communities, say like in Bucks or in the western side of Montgomery County, where there were a lot of farmers. We don't work where we live anymore.
Right.
And you couple that with what you're saying, work-life balance, but you also have just pulls in different directions. Our kids are involved in more. Some families are taking care of aging parents, and it's just they're torn in a lot of directions.
Right.
And I think the other thing it's important to know is we are not the only ones experiencing this. I would say we're the ones who are trying to get ahead of it and not wait for someone to come into a public meeting and say, we're taking ourselves off as the first response team in on a call because
Right.
we can't do it.
Right.
I think that would be worse. That would be like, well, where were you? Why didn't you see this coming? I think it's been decades that I've been hearing about, like in the 1970s, how many volunteer firefighters there were. And I remember being at a conference, and it was Governor Rendell at the time who was talking about and sort of sounding the alarm, no pun intended, but
Right.
that we're in trouble. The numbers are declining and declining. And it was sort of putting all the municipal managers who were in the room like on notice, like you need to be paying attention to this. And just because you might not have a volunteer fire department in your community, you're still vulnerable because you're depending on the ones around you.
Right.
And they are going through this same thing. And there is going to be that call where you scratch.
Right.
You just were, you say, look, we can't get a truck out.
Right.
Having a truck with a driver, as I've learned, is useless if that driver, when he gets there, he or she can't do anything.
Right.
Because there are standards. You don't go in by yourself, obviously. You can't be out there connecting water to a hydrant and running a hose and, making and staying by the truck and being inside or approaching that building.
Right. And, it's also yet you make the point about the driver, or, at least we got a truck there. Well, yeah, at least you did get a truck there. But what about the lives of the firefighters you're putting at risk because you don't have the right size crew that you need? You have no crew integrity because they've never worked with each other. Firefighting is like a sports team. Everybody knows their role. They need to practice. They need to be able to predict what each other's going to do. They need to know each other's strengths and weaknesses. And is it good enough just to get a truck there? I think for the optics, yeah, it looks great. But if you have two people and one person goes in to put the fire out, yes, the fire got put out, but he wouldn't be able to make rescues. Or if she got stuck, who's going to get hurt?
I was just saying, they're vulnerable being in there by themselves.
And this sounds like a callous statement, but I don't want it to come off that way. But we have been a volunteer fire department in Montgomery Township for FDMT since 2002, and before that time it was Colmar, and that was great, and it did save the taxpayers a lot of money because of volunteers. But at some point, right, we live in a nice community. The expectation is that we get there on time and effectively do our job, and that we don't put people in undue risk. And I worry about that. I worry about the change in building construction, the type of materials that are in your home, the time delay between career and volunteers. And are we putting our volunteers at greater risk because we're setting them up to be faced with conditions that are out of their control or unable to be controlled? And now we're saying to them, go in that building and rescue that person 6 minutes after the career staff could have got there and done it more safely and efficiently. So we're putting our vulnerable volunteers who are trained, and we have training standards, and we worked hard to make sure that the training standards were the same for the volunteers in career, but we're putting them in a situation where they're making decisions or acting at an advanced stage of firefighting, and it's a different animal at that point.
I saw a training video recently that you were kind enough to invite me to, and I think what I walked away from, besides the danger of the job, was the conditions. So you walk in and now there's smoke filling up a room. The smoke detectors in this home are going off. You're wearing apparatus for breathing, which means you can't be heard clearly. The idea of possibly bringing people together who've never worked together on a regular basis before, to me, is frightening. Mm-hmm. This isn't, going out and, handling a parking lot and arranging for cars to go park, and, you're working one end and I'm working the other. It was frightening to me sitting there watching it.
Have you ever been in my house?
No, I have not. You've never invited me to Club Wiegman.
I'm sorry about that. But just imagine going into my house to find my children, and it's dark, and it's hot, and it's loud, and it's chaotic. And now I'm telling you, navigate my house and find my family. It's impossible. We are very lucky that technology has caught up with thermal imaging cameras, but we rely on coordinated fire attacks. And we rely on doing a lot of things, lights out, not being able to see. Everybody thinks it's like Chicago fire. You go and, oh, there's the pretty fire, put the water on it. It's not like that. Most of the time you can't even see fire. You feel it before you see it.
I'm telling you, it changed me a lot watching that, because I mean, obviously I know what a fire looks like from the outside, but what I saw inside, I thought, oh my gosh, how did they do this? Even with the training, you can't hear clearly on a radio. And if you're working with someone and you don't know their pattern of behavior or how they're going to attack a fire, everybody's vulnerable then.
Right. Yeah. And when we look at what causes firefighter deaths, we see lack of command, lack of control, lack of communication, and lack of coordination. And I say that, but all that takes time to refine and time to practice and people working together.
Yeah. Now couple that in with the fact that they're volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
They're taken away from their families for training, which is integral to make sure that we don't send them in even more vulnerable. So let's talk about the time commitment and training that's required. So I walk in to your office and I say, I want to be a volunteer firefighter. Now what?
I say, welcome aboard. And then I say, are you ready for that?
And they say, aren't you a little too old for this?
No, never. I'd love to go with it. It'd be fun. I say, all right, well, the first thing we have to do is we have to get you the basic training. We have to get you to get the entry level position, the entry level training for our position, and you're looking at 200 hours. So you're looking at a Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, or Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday for 6 months. And then once you're done that and you pass the written test, the national written test and the practical test,
Then I get my blue light and it's
then
yeehaw.
you get your blue light and yeah. But then, we have training requirements as a department. We expect that everybody's there at least once or twice a month to do the continual education and training. But it's a lot of training that you do on your own. We had Frank Lieb here, who's a retired New York City fire chief, to do a training for our people. Back in January, we did the daytime with our staff and the nighttime as a regional training. And he said, you really have to learn every day. Pick up an article, read something, watch a video, but you need to always be learning in this job. And it's true, because things are always changing. And the fire service, we're not good at change. They say that the fire service is 200 years of history and no progress, or 200 years of tradition and no progress. And a lot of things are changing. Building construction, look at cars, right? Like Tesla's and EV storage and the ordinance we just passed to help mitigate any issues with that. But it's a constant development of a firefighter. And if you're not willing to constantly and continually be training, volunteers have to be professional. Professional doesn't mean that you're paid. Professional means that you're really good and competent and you're willing to learn your job. So we have professional volunteers. We have standards to make sure they're professional volunteers. It's not good enough just to get on a fire truck and show up and point the hose. Like, you need to know, because Pennsylvania, we see line of duty deaths in the country, 100 a year, and the majority of those Pennsylvania has the highest rate of line of duty deaths. So this isn't volunteering at your church or volunteering to coach your kids' baseball team. This is volunteering in an activity where you could die, or because of your inaction or your inability to perform your job or your lack of knowledge, somebody else could die. And we saw it during COVID. We were asking volunteers to respond out to people's homes to help them during COVID. And we saw a great reduction in responses, because people were like, this is my volunteer activity. I don't want to bring COVID home to my family. And then somebody dies, a vulnerable person in my household dies because I brought COVID home from my volunteer activity. And I don't think people realize the magnitude of that, as your neighbor who's a volunteer wants to help his community at any point could die. And it could be a situation that's totally out of their control. They get lost, they get disoriented, they run out of air, something else happens, there's a collapse, and they pass away. Or driving to the firehouse and they get into a car crash. So the risk versus the reward is something we have to measure, because what is the cost benefit analysis for continuing to just hope that somebody answers the call?
So we've talked about this since you were hired in 2020. Even during the pandemic, we discussed that very thing, that people, how do you ask a volunteer to go when we were so uncertain about what COVID really was? But what are some of the other reasons that it's hard to recruit volunteers?
I think the nature of the job. I think that, it's not all about going out and just spraying water, right? I think the calls that keep me up at night are the odors and the smells and the things that, we couldn't figure out. Why does my house smell like this? I don't know. We've tried everything. Or what's leaking gas? I don't know. We've tried everything. Now we have Pico out here. I think as we continue to evolve as a profession, we see a lot of the PTSD. We come to a lot of scenes that are full of trauma and full of awful sights. People always put up that exterior that they can handle it, but there's calls that bother me. There's things that I've seen that I wish I haven't seen. And I don't know if people are as willing nowadays to put themselves in that type of environment. I think work-life balance, the training requirements, the lack of legacy, the lack of generational
I think that's
development.
huge. I know in some of the fire companies that I've had just casual relationships with, I've talked to a firefighter who dad served, grandfather served, uncle served, but that's also a time when everybody grew up and lived in the same place, and you moved out of your parents' home, you stayed in the same, could be even 2 streets over.
Right.
It's just not that way now.
Yeah, I mean, I got involved in the fire service because my dad was a police officer. And when he was working the streets, the firehouse caught on fire. And he ran in and saved the trucks and the equipment. And they made him an honorary member. But my dad was also an EMT. And he drove an ambulance for Ronhurst with my grandfather. And my grandfather came home from World War II and wanted to help his community. So he drove an ambulance. He actually died driving the ambulance. He had a heart attack while transporting. And then, growing up, I just got involved, and I've been involved. And one of the coolest things I got when you hired me, thank you, or the board, but when you got me as chief, was a relative from Pottsville sent a newspaper clipping of my great-grandfather riding on the first steam firefighter in Minersville, right? So there's all these connections and all this family legacy. My son wants nothing to do with it. I tried to get him involved in our Explorer posts, and he wants to play sports and he wants to do other things. And, that's what he wants to do. And my daughter, she's not interested either. And part of it, I think, is that they see how much time I'm away from home, and they don't like that, and they don't want to do that. So I think, that lack of legacy, especially in Montgomery Township, where our younger population of kids don't have a chance to be legacy firefighters here, because they can't afford to live in town. I know several families where the sons or the children have gone through fire school and then they move out of town. And that's a significant problem that we have in Montgomeryville, is that we have a lot of young members. We have an Explorer post now. We had our first Explorer who transitioned into junior membership, so that's a huge win. But we train them all up, and we have them responding, and then it's time for them to start their lives, whether it's go to college or get a job, and they just can't afford to live in Montgomeryville. So we're training firefighters for Upper Bucks and Upper Montgomery County. Our businesses don't allow firefighters to leave work. We've had firefighters at our place who, were let go from their jobs. You can't let a person let go for firefighting. They're protected, but I think that it impacted their jobs, and their employers waited for something else to happen, and that was the reason. But because they were leaving or coming into work late.
So conversely then, I would say, that's why we're not getting younger volunteers. We also have a core group that's aging and that are burning out. As we heard at the last Board of Supervisors meeting in July, 2 volunteer firefighters who are key leaders in FDMT came to the board, and I remember specifically saying, we're tired. So, there's also a safety factor, I'd imagine. As we get older, we just, I don't want to be up on a ladder. I sort of have a rule now. If it's not something I can reach, I'm not up on a ladder.
Right. The average age of a firefighter who lives in Montgomery Township and has firefighter 1 is 54 years old. That's the average age. Now, we have younger firefighters.
Sure.
A lot of them, don't live in town.
You also have older.
And we have older firefighters, 73, 69 years old, 59 years old, 58 years old, who are still getting on the fire truck. And our younger people, when I look at our officers, we have one that lives in Chalfont, one that lives in Hilltown, one that lives in Lansdale, one that lives in Horsham. And there are younger people. But our older active firefighters, average age is 54. The attrition is killing us. And you see it, and what risk are we putting those people at? And what risk are we putting firefighters at who are working with those conditions? So yeah, aging is, the department was founded in 2002, and a lot of people who came over were from Colmar. And then, like I said, I've been here since 2006, and it goes through flows of people responding, but I can consistently tell you that we've always been band-aiding to get the truck out, always. And it's, again, I don't want to say it's because we don't have great volunteers. We have awesome volunteers.
No, I think nobody would, even as an outsider who would never consider doing 200 hours over 3 days a week for 6 months because of other commitments I have, I would never fault a volunteer or try to imply that they're anything less than the great individuals they are for doing this. So this has been on your radar since before you got here. It's definitely been on my radar because I've been hearing it and just waiting and waiting. You have come up with a proposed solution. You have shared it with the Board of Supervisors. I totally support it. So let's talk about what a proposed expansion would look like in practical terms, and how many new staff are we looking at hiring?
19 new staff. My plan, which I think would be the best for our department and is within national best practices and NFPA best practices, is to have 4 shifts or platoons, 4 platoons of 6 people. That would be a battalion chief, a captain, and 4 firefighters that work the shift. The battalion chief is obviously, we need a chief on the outside. We know that firefighters die because of lack of command and control. So we were guaranteeing that a chief will always be on scene to direct operations. And then we have our crew. And we would have 4 on the truck, and then a 5th person would be in our fire marshal's vehicle. And, we currently have 5 on our shift. 7 really, between John and I. John's our assistant chief, and then me being the chief. And then working during the day, we have Andrew as our captain and 4 firefighters. And that has been proven most effective, to have 4 firefighters on the truck and 1 in the car, so that they can be out there doing other things, but also be an extra person to assist with firefighting operations. And we'd want to work 24 hours on and then 72 hours off. That seems to be the best practice for firefighters in rest and recovery after their shift, and quality of life and lack of burnout, and then commitment to the organization. And commitment to the organization is huge because we invest a lot of money in our fire staff. We send them to trainings. We have a drone team. We do all types of tactical rescue training because of that all hazards environment. And then, when you look at this shift, we want these people on that platoon working together and to know each other inside and out for that crew integrity, because we don't want there to be a point where they don't know who they're working with. And that mercenary approach just to get people on a truck, I think is counterintuitive to everything we're doing in Montgomery Township. We have tried everything for volunteers. I think we have done more than a lot of municipalities. We have a federal grant for recruitment and retention. We have our township tax incentive. Hopefully we'll have the school district tax incentive. We have the membership to the rec. We provide all the training and uniforms and everything for free. We have our night stipend program, which is our members. So we have done a lot of things. They have the best equipment.
But what they don't have is time.
Time, right.
There's only so much time in a week.
Right.
We only have so many hours in a day that we're able to do different things. And that's something that's beyond our control.
Right.
Because I have to say, you're not the only department. I drive all over and I see, the signs are, I was up in the Poconos and there were signs like that, like they're looking for heroes, it's amazing to me. And I guess what really is surprising is that it's taken this long, that we're now at this point. So what's happening that's really concerning you right now? Why not wait another year? Why not wait 3 years? What are you concerned about?
I mean, based on our numbers over the last 3 years, we are looking at a significant increase in response times. In 2023, our volunteers were able to get on scene. And we're talking, when I say get on scene, I mean an apparatus, not a chief. A fire truck is
that
able
can actually be there to do something.
Right. In 2023, during volunteer hours, a truck got there in 8 minutes and 36 seconds. In 2024, it was 9 minutes and 25 seconds. And in 2025 so far, it's 9 minutes and 49 seconds. So when we're looking at the data pool, we have 1,600 incidents we're pulling data from. So we're trending, and now we have the statistics to show that we're trending in a terrible direction. And I am afraid that if we do not do something now, it's going to be too late, and we're going to be compromising our town safety, the people who live here, and our firefighter safety. And we're going to be, we have a chance to do it now. We should do it now before we put anybody's life.
Yeah, I don't want that phone call.
No.
I don't want it to happen on our watch. Right. So what are other communities doing? Other municipalities, are they going to this model?
Municipalities that are based like our demographics that are similar to us are moving to combination departments. When we look at what we're surrounded by, Horsham Fire is 24/7 fire and EMS. Warrington has daytime fire. Warminster just went daytime fire. Northampton is now 24 hours. Upper Providence. So townships that are similar to us, that have the same social economic background as our town are doing these types of things because they're just not getting the firefighters out. And, a township is tasked with, and it's their essential responsibility to make sure that firefighters, police, EMS, public safety
and infrastructure. They're the two things that as a municipality, especially a township of the second class like Montgomery, that we are tasked in the Commonwealth Code to take care of.
Right.
It doesn't tell us how to take care of them. It says it is on us to take care of them. The amenities, if you will, people who have libraries, rec centers, pools, all of our wonderful parks that we have that are really quality of life that draw people here, that's extra.
Right.
If you don't have the basics covered, those extras really,
right,
they don't matter as much.
And you see Newtown, right?
Yeah.
Upper Marion, Upper Moreland. So all communities that are similar to us are facing these problems, but they're also addressing the issues, and they're being successful in doing that. And
so I'd imagine just like in law enforcement, then there's not as many, and you have a larger group that are looking for firefighters, for qualified firefighters. And that to me is a challenge as well, because we want the right firefighter. We want them to fit in the culture that you've created here, the culture that is being sustained. And to your point, you can't just drop them in and say, okay, work together. This is not like an office where someone's doing one job, someone's doing another. They go in as a team. And I would imagine, now the competition is good.
Right. And requirements, our entry-level requirements to work here, it takes somebody 2 to 3 years to achieve those requirements. It's not like they just go to Act 120, and I don't want to say just like, but they go to Act 120 for 6 months or however, and then they can be a police officer. We require Fire 1 and Fire 2. We require other classes, VRT, EVOC, VRT is Vehicle Rescue Technician, just to apply. Mm-hmm. If we were given the ability to hire the 19, we would offer some of those classes in-house to get more applicants. But you're looking at somebody who very early on knows that they want to be a career firefighter, and they have to get those classes. They really have to volunteer in our system, because we're not a large city. In our system, they really have to volunteer for a couple of years before they can actually be ready to be career firefighters. So to kind of groom them or cultivate them to blossom in our department, they need to come with a lot of schools just to apply.
So I guess my question for you then, in terms of this solution that we're proposing, why hire and onboard 19 at once? Why can't we stagger them? Why can't we, wait a few years and see what happens?
The number one is crew integrity and crew management. If we bring these people in all together and we put them in the platoons from the beginning, then we have the ability to indoctrinate them in our culture and help them learn the strengths and weaknesses of each other and the crew integrity piece, and to get them working together on the same page. And we saw that. When we hired last time, we hired 3. And we put together a training program, and all 3 came in together. They all trained together, and now they're a cohesive group. They've learned our culture. They feed off each other, but we were able to bring them into our culture all at once. If we staggered them, the first thing it would impact would be work schedules, and they would have a work schedule that would not be advantageous or attractive, because we would just have to plug them in where we had gaps. And for young people, who we currently have 3 guys who are, getting married or about to get married or start their families, not knowing when you're going to work is not a place I want to be at, because I want to be home with my family when it's appropriate and at work when it's appropriate. But I think to bring everyone in, to onboard them all at the same time, to tell them what the expectations are, to get them all in our culture, to really indoctrinate them in the way we do things in Montgomery Township will be the best way to ensure their safety. And if our firefighters are safe, then our residents are safe. Piecemealing this together is just not the way to go. I don't want to do that. I will do it if that's the direction I'm giving. But I think that piecemealing it will really impact the ability for us to continue to operate as a premier fire service agency.
So you disclosed earlier that you're a township resident.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I shared with the board when we presented this to them in July was sort of some scenarios for real estate taxes. So average house in Canterbury is currently paying about $500 a year for township taxes. Just for point of reference, about $955 for county, and school district, a little over $5,200. So under this calculation, we determined, obviously, this is a major increase in fire's budget that can't be sustained solely by what we bring in now in property taxes, in earned income tax. So we would be looking at a real estate tax. I don't want to get into the technical things, but obviously 1.4 mils, which an increase of that, so someone who's in Canterbury paying about $500, it's going to go to about $735. But somebody might say that's a huge jump, but we're talking about bringing 19 people into staff fully 24/7 in this township. But when I did the math a little further, it equates to less than $20 a month. And I'm not trying to be cavalier. I don't live in Montgomery Township, but I pay property taxes as well. The municipality I lived in did a referendum a few years ago because they wanted to purchase fire trucks and have to take on debt to do it. And it was supported by the community. I think the goal of this podcast is to give people the education that I think they need, so that it's not just we're coming in and saying we have a budget deficit and we're plugging it by proposing a tax increase. We are talking about an expansion of services, an expansion of vital services to this community. But the one thing that we will hear about is people who are on a fixed income. And we have the homestead exemption for, people who have taxes, and we could take so much off of that. But how sensitive are you to the fact that we have residents who are on fixed incomes?
Super sensitive. I live in this town, and I bleed Montgomery Township. And I think I told you this, but when the Neshaminy Falls Clubhouse burned down, that was pretty emotional for me, because I interact with the people who live in the falls all the time. And, I don't think there's anything different we could have done to prevent that tragedy. I think we did a really good job protecting exposure so they didn't lose more property. But I was sad, and I felt like I let people down. And I'm not cavalier going into this. Like, I want more firefighters. I want to build Bill's kingdom. I think that you get what you pay for, and we're going to continue to provide the best service that we can in a timely manner. And I think over the last 6 years, we've demonstrated to our community what an aggressive, assertive fire department can be, that gets out there and believes in the mission of community risk reduction. Our firefighters are doing things that no other municipalities are doing. We're doing over 1,200 business inspections a year. We're running a drone team. We're supporting public works. We're supporting police. We're supporting code enforcement, right? Have a QRS. We're running EMS calls. We're training. We're providing fire and business safety. We're providing CPR, first aid, and AED. We're going to be the first. When you call the fire department, that's your worst day. And most of the time when the fire department shows up, that's the first time you've ever dealt with Montgomery Township. And any normal resident pays their bills. The first time they they deal with Montgomery Township is our fire department, right? And I want to be the best ambassadors for Montgomery Township, and we're going to be. So this isn't just, we're going to increase your taxes so firefighters can sit around and watch TV. This is so they can get out there and help their community and be the first people there to mitigate whatever happens, whatever disaster or emergencies out there. And, I live in town and I know it's going to be a tax increase, but I also know that if I'm out mowing the grass and have a heart attack, that a fire truck is going to be there to save me in 4 minutes and 50 seconds. And I don't have to rely on my neighbors, hopefully providing CPR for 10 minutes for a fire truck to get there. And we've seen it. We've seen the amount of destruction that can be caused by time. And there's a significant increase in the services you're going to get and the response time that you're going to get as a township president. And I had a resident text me after, because I live in town and I was the president of North Penn Lacrosse and a member of MMR. You meet a lot of people, you have a lot of connections, and people watch the board presentation and they said, "Hey, we live in Montgomery Township, we expect nice things." And I was like, "Yeah, you do, but you do expect nice things, but you also expect that when you're having your worst day, that Montgomery Township shows up." And our firefighters are not just firefighters, they are ambassadors for Montgomery Township, and they need to be there.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about next steps with you. I haven't really run this by you, but my thought was, I know the board is very concerned about making sure that we don't just rely on social media, don't just rely on this podcast. I think the podcast is going to be great because people can listen to it at their leisure. They can pause it, they can come back to it, versus a set date and time to come to a meeting over the summer where possibly people are away and aren't available to be here. That being said, I think, and I don't know if you agree, but I think there's probably an opportunity for a couple of meetings, a couple of town halls, to listen to people, but to get the word out. This is why we're doing what we're doing. What do you think?
I'm in. We've been trying to get out. We've reached out to all the homeowners associations. I just want the fire department. I want Montgomery Township to be fire safe all year long. I want there to be a culture of fire safety. I want people to think when they're out there in their daily lives, like, how do I be safer for my family and my friends? And I think we've done a really good job over the last 6 years, getting the fire truck out there, being part of the very fabric of the community. And I would love the opportunity to go out and speak to people in town hall meetings, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever it is, and just articulate, because I think that information and knowledge is power. And if I can stand in front of them and say, those people, and say, "Hey, I know you're on a fixed income, or I know that your taxes are gonna go up, but this is what I promise you is gonna happen, and this is what's gonna happen." And I don't know if these people have had the opportunity to. We've talked a lot about our volunteer firefighters, and they're very great, and they've done a really great job, and they're going to continue. We're not losing our volunteer firefighters.
They're just going to be the supplement to the
right,
not the group that we're relying on solely on nights and weekends.
Right. And I think that we'll have more volunteer firefighters because they know that they don't have that commitment to come to every fire alarm on a Friday, that they can come to the bigger calls. And they don't have to leave their families just to make sure the truck shows up. They know their truck's going to get there. And when there's a need for them, they'll come, and we're going to create that culture. But I also think our career staff is amazing. And I think that the opportunity for our public to interact with our career staff more is so positive for our fire department. And if we can get 19 more people like the 5 great people we have now, we're going to be the best department in the country. I don't care. I'll say it. I mean, I know we're talking about the region and we're talking about Montgomery Township and Montgomery County, but we're a premier fire service agency. And we are so fortunate, and I am so fortunate to have the greatest staff that come to work every day wanting to make a difference. And if we're given the ability to hire 19 at once, then I'll be able to pick out the 19 best people to staff well, because I am fearful that as Newtown and Upper Moreland and Upper Marion and Upper Providence and Warminster all keep expanding, that we're not going to have quality people out there. And, we have a lot of great people that we have trained that have know our culture, that are volunteers now, that want to be career firefighters. We're going to lose them. One of our best young firefighters just got offered a career job at Upper Moreland. I lost him. I needed him. I can't afford to lose any of the people that we've been cultivating and growing over the years. I'm going to do, I already told Chief Glassman I'm going to do everything I can to get them back. But
No, I agree. I mean, we don't want the C team, not when you're talking about firefighters.
no, we want
You
the
know,
best.
we understand that not everybody works the same way, but what I understand now is like police and fire is just very different. Those are the calls I dread getting when my phone rings, is that it's going to, or I get a message, a text, you need to call me. And I'm always thinking, oh, please don't, my first prayer is please don't let it be one of our people.
We have the best police department. We have the best EMS service around. Now we need the best fire department. We need to complete our commitment to public safety. We have to do it because I can't guarantee for you that we're going to get a fire truck out. It's getting that bad.
No, I understand. And, this isn't something that is unique to us, which I guess is the other thing I would point out to people. This has been something we've been hearing, not just in Pennsylvania, but across the country, where volunteerism is dropping. There was a book a long time ago, Bowling Alone.
Yes.
And the whole reason for that is, it's like we do more and more things as an island. We don't join bowling leagues anymore. We don't join book clubs. We're not at the church potluck every week. They just don't exist. A garden club. So those are all great and fine things, but they're fun things. This is integral to the health and safety of our community. That being said, one of the other ideas I had, which I hadn't told you about yet, which I haven't told our public information team yet, I would like to take all the information that we provided the board and put it on our website on a dedicated page, that people can go in and out. And we've even put some FAQs together. Here's a common question, here's an answer. Not to take the place of a public meeting or a town hall, whatever you want to call it. But again, another source of information, especially for somebody who can't get there, or maybe somebody doesn't want to sit and listen to us chat for however long this has gone on.
Right.
So that I think is another. The more information that goes out there, the better I'll feel about any decision of the board.
I am so proud of our department. I can't wait to get out there and brag about how awesome our people are. I can't wait. I can't. After we have the opportunity to meet with people, I would be shocked if they said, no, I don't want to do this, other than financial concern. But I think everything else, you get what you pay for, and we definitely provide a great service, and the fire department is definitely worth the money. So, and you brought up Bowling Alone. We don't have, people don't connect to their communities now because of social media and the internet and all those types of things. So people don't have to walk down the firehouse to have a sense of community. They find that online, and
I remember walking to a firehouse when I was in kindergarten and like just being enamored by, wow, it really looks like, with the pole in the middle and, the dog was there. It was the quintessential, and I grew up in Norristown, and it was the quintessential, what you think of as a hometown fire department.
We don't have that.
No.
And that's sad that we don't have that, but that was before our time. And, our firehouses are not really in conducive locations for community stop-bys. It's a chore to get people up the firehouse, but they're always welcome.
So I think in closing, I would want residents to understand that we are not going into this, without any thought. We are not cavalier about proposing a tax increase. But it's a tax increase for a vital service that we are tasked to provide to our residents, to our businesses, to visitors in the township. It's not just about people who live here. It's never easy to come to a board and say, this is what we need to do. But I'm not coming in and saying we need to do it because I need to plug a hole because we haven't done a good job with our spending. Across the township, we spend our money very judiciously. So I can stand behind this and say, this is the way we have to go, in order to ensure that a year from now, we're not coming to the board and saying, we have a problem, we have to remove ourselves and rely on our good neighbors in Horsham, Lower Gwinnett, Lansdale, New Britain across County Line Road to provide fire services because we can't do it. So with that being said, on the fiscal side, any closing thoughts as Fire Chief?
We've always kind of gone with the mantra that we need to be able to provide for our township. And although we rely on mutual aid, we need to be able to provide that service. And, relying on mutual aid is essential. We need to make sure mutual aid comes and helps us on scene, but we can't rely on them for first response. And as other fire companies are facing the same challenges that we are, and calls continue to increase for non-fire EMS or other types of services, we need to be able to provide for our residents. And if we don't do something now, I'm not sure how we're going to provide. I don't know what else we can do as a leadership team on the township side and the fire department side to bolster volunteerism that's been decreasing for decades.
Thanks for your time today, Chief.
Thanks, boss.
Thanks for listening to the We Are Montgomery Township podcast. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast and follow Montgomery Township on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at MontTWP. Our display name is Montgomery Township, PA. Until next time, we are Montgomery Township.